How much confidence do you have in the speaker right now?
None. Zero. What basis is there for confidence? You cannot forfeit the tool of Republican unity. It was not necessary to do.
Is the speaker lying about the way he's characterizing this bill?
Yes, he's lying. But the bill is chock full of things that are cosmetic and artificial that have the same exact effect.
How are you feeling about tonight?
Very good.
Leader Jeffries said yesterday Republicans agreed to put up 150 votes. Is that accurate? Do you think you can do it?
I don't count the votes. Talk to Emma.
What's your pitch to members today?
Vote for the bill. It'll be the largest cut in American history. Put us on the right track to the first step of changing the way we spend money.
Are you worried about your gavel?
All right, guys, so we got to talk about the political football going back and forth in Congress between the GOP and Kevin McCarthy and the Democrats, right? When it comes to this debt limit / spending cut negotiation that Democrats or Republicans, mainly Kevin McCarthy and Democrats, are having, okay? Because Kevin McCarthy is catching a whole lot of pushback for a compromise that he agreed to with Joe Biden in principle that does not cut spending enough, okay? It does not add major or strong work requirements for government benefit programs like SNAP, TANF, or Medicaid. It also does not roll back Biden's student loan bailout, okay? It also does not do enough to roll back Biden's beefing up of the IRS, okay? It doesn't roll back enough of the unclaimed COVID funds. Kevin McCarthy is making a lot of significant compromises with the Democrats that is really pissing off a lot of people in the GOP, mainly the House Freedom Caucus.
This doesn't represent any material change in the direction of where this country is going in terms of spending. The massive increase of debt was sort of a blip on the radar. But even the Limit, Save, Grow Act is just nibbling around the edges of what needs to be done. I don't understand how my colleagues can go to the steps of the Capitol and have all these groups from their middle school and elementary school and high school and talk to them about all the future of this country and where we're headed, when each and every one of them has a $100,000 debt payment attached to them.
Washington is doing it again. While you were celebrating Memorial Day, all of our men and women who gave their lives for this great nation, and you were spending time with your family and your friends, this town was cutting another crap deal that's going to put you more in debt with no real changes whatsoever. So the American people need to understand full and well, do not listen to the talking points. Do not listen to the cool phrases that are being thrown out in commercials on CNN or Fox or MSNBC, because Washington is lying again. This bill has no cap in raising the debt, just a date in the future. We have no idea what that number is going to look like. Some people are saying $4 trillion. Some people are saying $3.5 trillion. This bill in year one might cut $12 billion if you just want to be generous. So who here thinks it's cool to cut $12 billion in exchange for $4 trillion? I don't think that's cool at all. This bill actually keeps the Biden baseline intact for the federal agencies. The Republicans in Congress have been saying for months that we need to get back to pre-COVID spending levels. This bill canonizes post-COVID spending levels brought to us by Joe Biden and the Democrats. This bill keeps all of Joe Biden's policy, all of Joe Biden's spending intact. This bill does nothing for the Green New Deal subsidies that are going to cripple our electric grid. So when Americans are trying to figure out that they went and bought this electric car that they were subsidized to buy, but when they plug it in, there's not enough electricity on the grid, that is because Washington subsidized all these Green New Deal projects and nobody stood up to it except for people standing behind me right now.
So, again, I want you guys to understand, this is a fluid situation. They're currently still negotiating, right? And we're going to cover some more of the negotiation and the politics. That's the main point of this video, is to talk about the politics behind this, not necessarily what's in the bill, because let's be honest, a lot of politicians don't really know what's in the actual bill, okay? None of them really know, okay? The negotiation is still going, but basically the top line thing that people are focused on that Kevin McCarthy agreed to with the White House is to suspend the debt limit with no cap through January 1st, 2025, while also cutting non-defense spending to fiscal year 2022 levels, capping growth at 1% for the next 2 years, and proposing non-mandatory caps for the 4 years afterward. Okay, so basically, they're saying that along with the fact that, again, we're not getting back all the unspent COVID money. We're not getting back all of the money that the Democrats are spending to beef up the IRS. We're not strengthening work requirements enough for certain government benefits. Again, all this stuff is subject to be negotiated and changed by the time the final vote happens tonight, okay? But I'm just saying, these are the general arguments. People are pissed, okay? And here's the issue, right? The U.S. government is going to run out of money in like a week, okay? A few days, according to Janet Yellen, right? So this bill essentially has to get done, okay? It has to get voted on tonight. Spoiler alert, it's probably, definitely, most likely going to pass. I would be extremely shocked if it didn't pass. But I'm going to explain to you guys why it's going to pass and what the Freedom Caucus can do about it. And if they actually have the cojones to put their money where their mouth is and to do what they claim that they're going to do, if Kevin McCarthy is not beholden to some of the things they agreed to before allowing him to become speaker. Because you guys remember that big battle between the Freedom Caucus and Kevin McCarthy? Yeah, well, it's moments like this where the Freedom Caucus can now leverage their power, okay, that they now have to potentially try to remove Kevin McCarthy as speaker because he's compromising too much with the Democrats in a situation that, me personally, I feel like he really does not have to compromise that much, okay? So this brings me to this news clip that I want to react to so you guys can kind of get an update here on what's going on with the negotiations, and I'm just going to comment on it and react to it.
We begin, though, on Capitol Hill with the efforts to approve a debt ceiling deal and avoid a national default. Lawmakers are using pressure to accept the agreement struck by President Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, but more than 24 are already vowing to reject it. Nicole Killian has more now from Capitol Hill.
Good morning. House Republicans met behind closed doors for about 2 hours last night to try to rally support for this bill. GOP leaders are projecting confidence, but it's still not clear if the votes are there.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Today, the debt deal is bound for the House floor after clearing the powerful Rules Committee Tuesday night by one vote.
What do the 13 of us owe the rest of Congress? We owe them an honest shake.
Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massie helped push the measure over the edge after it failed to get unanimous support from panel Republicans like Chip Roy.
Is it worth blowing up this deal when you have that default deadline less than a week from now?
Default is off the table. It would be the President of the United States that would choose the default.
Yeah, so I want to talk about that real quick, right? Because, again, this is what politics comes to play here, okay? None of these politicians, right, Democrats or Republicans, want to be the ones that get blamed if the U.S. government, hypothetically, was to not pay its bills, okay? If the U.S. government was to not pay its bills, okay, to pay people who hold U.S. debt, to hold U.S. treasuries, if the government was not to pay its bills, that would be an economic disaster. And I'm not just talking about domestically, but also internationally as well, too, okay? The financial markets would probably collapse, okay? And it would be a disaster, okay? So the politicians know that a deal has to get done, okay? But neither party wants to take blame for what happens in a worst-case scenario in which they don't get a deal done, okay? So with that being said, the problem here is that I think that Kevin McCarthy let the Biden administration basically go months on end basically refusing to negotiate, or at least publicly saying that we're not going to negotiate on this. We just want a clean increase on the debt limit, and that's it, right? We don't want any type of spending cuts to go along with it, despite the fact that we spent so much money during the pandemic that our national debt is ridiculous. Our debt to GDP ratio is ridiculous. Don't matter. Democrats just want to continue to spend an unlimited amount of money. I think Kevin McCarthy is right to try to put some strings attached to the financial situation of the country going forward. However, he's not going nearly as far as he should with this compromise with Joe Biden that he quite literally does not have to do. The reason why is because the American people are on his side, right? The American people overwhelmingly support spending cuts and increasing the debt limit, right? That's what they support. They support what the GOP passed in April, okay? And Kevin McCarthy is simply letting the Biden administration and the Democrats unnecessarily pressure him to compromise when he should just be taking a hard line, right? He should be like, look, you're either going to pass this bill that, hey, we passed back in April. You guys refuse to negotiate up until now. If the country defaults, it's your fault, right? Look at inflation. Look at how the Fed has to continue to raise interest rates. Out of control spending is the reason why Americans are struggling. We're reining that in, right? I think that's an extremely strong argument for the GOP bill. And I think in the court of public opinion, if the country was to default, it would be terrible, right? It would suck. But I think Democrats would take most of the blame for it because Joe Biden's president, they control the Senate, and the GOP already had a proposal. The GOP is putting out a proposal that the American people agree with.
CNN has a new poll out. I'm sure you've seen it in just the last 2 days. And what it shows, really interestingly, is that 60% of Americans say Congress should only raise the debt ceiling if it comes with spending cuts at the same time. And that includes 58% of independents. Is your position out of step now, Congresswoman, with the majority of the American people?
I'm so glad you raised that poll, because I think it's really important to look at what that poll says. If you just say to people, should we cut spending, they will probably say yes. However, if you say, would you rather cut spending and reduce the deficit by cutting the tax breaks to the wealthiest corporations and wealthiest individuals, or would you like to cut your own health care, education, care for veterans, etc., I guarantee you that you would have even higher numbers that say, let's make sure that we're making the wealthy pay their fair share.
That's not what
that's the other thing we've been saying to the Republicans.
The poll says. This is the exact question that was asked of voters. What should Congress do on the debt ceiling? Raise only if spending cut? 60%. Raise no matter what? 24%. Not raise, let U.S. default? 15%. These are what they are saying to this critical question.
Okay? So, again, I think that he definitely dropped the ball here, and I think that, he could have used more of his leverage, okay? Because at the end of the day, you got to show that you're willing to go all the way. If you fold at the finish line, right, then, again, that's going to show that you really wasn't about it. Now, I think it's good that he got some things, but I definitely don't think that he's using all the leverage that he could use, and I think that's the issue with a lot of these Freedom Caucus Republicans.
At least 20 Republicans say they'll vote no on a final bill. It would lift the debt limit past the 2024 election and, according to new projections by the Congressional Budget Office, cut spending by $1.5 trillion over a decade.
It's bullshit. What do you say to your fellow Republicans who are firm no? Keep walking.
Hey, no walking backwards. Everybody has elected to here to take their vote.
I mean, are they expendable? Are you looking to flip them?
Try to get as many votes as we can.
Yeah, so the reality is this, okay? This is the truth. The honest to God truth is that Kevin McCarthy knows that he doesn't actually really need those votes, okay? And the people who are basically coming out here and acting so mad at Kevin McCarthy, which I don't doubt that they're sincere. They probably are upset, okay, because a lot of these House Freedom Caucus members didn't think that the first bill that the Republican passed went far enough in regards to spending cuts. But they know that their votes are not needed, right? So they can come out here and say whatever they want to say and then vote no, knowing that the bill is going to be passed, right? Like, they know that the bill is going to be passed, okay? Democrats don't want to take the blame. Okay, Republicans don't want to take the blame, but most importantly, moderate Democrats and moderate Republicans don't want to take the blame. And there's definitely enough of those Republicans in Congress in order to get a deal done. And that's why it's basically going to pass, right? I mean, I'm telling you that right now. I mean, I would be shocked if it didn't pass, okay? If it didn't pass, I would be shocked, okay? But again, the question is, moving forward, what is the House Freedom Caucus going to do to hold McCarthy accountable, okay? Because I think that even though, yes, he has to make some compromises, I do think he's compromising a little bit too much here. But again, they're claiming that they're probably going to maybe try to oust him from the speakership role. And we'll talk more about that as we go forward here.
Deal brokered between Speaker McCarthy and President Biden has some hardline conservatives calling for the speaker's ouster.
Do you think he should lose his job?
I think it's necessary because he's
catastrophically failed in this negotiation.
It's also tough to swallow.
Yeah, so let me talk about that. So if House Freedom Caucus members are actually serious about this, right? I'm keeping it 100 with you. If this is really their hardline issue where they're like, we can't continue to keep spending money the way that we're spending, okay? It's driving our country into an insurmountable amount of debt. I mean, we're already there. Then maybe this is justification for basically starting a motion to have a vote on Kevin McCarthy's speakership, which, if you guys remember, during the negotiations that the House Freedom Caucus was having with Kevin McCarthy, he agreed that the threshold to initiate a vote to oust him as speaker would be lowered from 5 to 1. So all it takes is one Republican to come out and to issue a motion to vote for Kevin McCarthy to be ousted from speakership, and then the House will have to vote on him being speaker again. All it takes is one Republican. But the question is, will any of these Republicans actually have the cojones to do that, right? Because they're doing a lot of talking, okay? But it really comes down to, okay, are you going to wield the power that you were given during your negotiations with Kevin McCarthy? Okay, are you going to try to oust him as speaker for compromising too much with the Biden administration? We'll see.
While for some progressive Democrats concerned about tougher work requirements and other carve-outs.
To have the president solely negotiating with Republicans itself, I don't think it was a really good look.
Well, I mean, y'all don't have a plan, right? What plan do you have? Okay, you don't have a plan. Okay, so I mean, at the end of the day, you can't really blame Biden for negotiating with Republicans when you're not negotiating with anything. What's the progressive plan, right? Just spend more money? That's a non-starter.
Want to make sure there's no default, so that's priority number one. But we also need to hold our ground and stand up for the most vulnerable Americans.
Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffrey says he's having discussions with his members, and this morning, White House negotiators and top aides are briefing House Democrats on the deal here at the Capitol. Anne Marie?
Well, thank you. Let us bring in Weijia Jiang now, who's following all of this from the White House for us. So, Weijia, President Biden said earlier this week that he feels good about the bill. I don't expect him to say anything else. Is that still the case, though? What are you hearing from the White House?
I think the White House is very clear-eyed that it is not going to be an easy fight, but the fact is that for all of the talk about, whether this is a bad deal for Democrats, none of those in the Democratic Party, even the left-leaning Progressive Caucus, are willing to say, publicly at least, that I am not going to vote for this bill.
And the reason why they're not going to say it is because they know that, again, if the country defaults, they're going to take the blame, right? Because they came out here and they voted no on the bill. Okay, so again, at the very least, you can say that the House Freedom Caucus, the Republicans, the hardline conservatives, they have more cojones because it seems like they're going to vote no, right? A lot of them are going to vote no than the progressives in the Democrat Party, because they're basically going to, make a big fuss about it, but they're probably going to vote yes. Okay, now, again, all of them probably won't vote yes. But again, a vast majority of both parties are going to vote yes on this because they do not want to default.
Haven't gone that far yet. And so even though there's a lot of work being done behind the scenes by the president and his team around him to sell this, to make sure they have the votes, I don't think that, they are worried it's not going to go through, because I think the White House's position is it could be worse. The U.S. could default. And, I imagine that lawmakers do not want that on their backs.
And that's why I say that, again, I understand why Republicans are mad at Kevin McCarthy, because it's like, dude, I mean, the American people agree with the Republican position right now on this, okay? You have the leverage in the House. You don't have the Senate, okay? And you don't have the presidency. But again, you have the leverage in regards to what we actually need right now. And you're not leveraging enough. Again, if you let the country default, most of that is going to go to Joe Biden, right? Most people are going to blame Joe Biden and say, well, why don't you do a deal with Republicans, right? Why would you let the country default instead of just agreeing to what the Republicans want to do? That's I think, how most people would see it. It would be very hard for them to weasel their way out of explaining why did they let the country default. And they all know that, right? Which is why the bill is going to pass. And, also Kevin McCarthy is keeping in mind that there needs to be compromise in the bill because the Senate is basically 50-50, okay, with Democrats having the majority. Again, politicians, both parties, they don't want to be blamed. So they end up really just kind of doing these type of compromises that may or may not be good for the country. In this case, I don't think it's good for the country in the long term to continue to compromise on spending. But this is why it's happening. The reason why it's happening is because neither party wants to take the blame, and Congress is too gridlocked right now to actually have either party get everything that they want out of this negotiation, right? That's the politics behind it. So, it's one of those things where there's a lot of political posturing, but everybody knows that this was going to pass. It's just political theater that they wait to the last minute to do this every single time, right? But, you would think that, again, Kevin McCarthy, if he had the cojones, he would call the Democrats bluff and actually say, you know what, I'll let the country default, right? We'll let the country default if you don't agree with what we want. Then you would really see, right? You would really see whether or not the Democrats will come to the table and actually have a real negotiation, because right now what's happening is that Kevin McCarthy, I think, is giving up too much. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.